Hello, everyone. I'm here. Trying to get used to a new version of live streaming that Facebook is offering. It's not the reason that my yoga class this morning kept cutting out. That was an internet glitch. Anyway, just new angles and things here. So thank you for your patience as I'm dancing around. Welcome back to my home kitchen. This is Annie from MP, Mindful Palette Movement Practitioner, Milwaukee Proud. I welcome you to, hi Anne, I welcome you to our afternoon class today. So just two classes this week. Today we are talking about fruit syrups for beverages. So I want to thank the Milwaukee Rec Department for helping us to stay connected during this time, helping to bring some new fresh classes to you each week. So with our class today, we're going to make some different fruit syrups, two different fruit syrups that you can use for beverages, whether you want to add a little bit of concentrated flavor to lemonade, sparkling water, if you want to use it in cocktails, whatever you want. You'll have some tools to make your own mixers, I guess, or syrups, like I say. But you can also use these beyond beverages. So I had written down some notes here on other ideas. In fact, I think it's in your handout too. So if you don't have the handouts, you can get those on there's a link on the Milwaukee Rec Department live stream of my video, and it has a PDF. So you can link to these handouts and hopefully get those. If not, I will be posting them by the end of the week on my Facebook business page, MP. And so on here at the end, my dishwasher is running, so there's some gurgling sounds. I apologize for that. At the end of the handout, after the 3 recipes, I have some additional uses for these fruit syrups. So on that handout, we have, you can use it as a syrup for pancakes, waffles, French toast, that sort of thing. You can use it to add flavor to smoothies or milkshakes, cocktails, of course. You could drizzle it over oatmeal. So another place where I sometimes use maple syrup. So you could use a different kind of syrup. On cakes and cupcakes. So on cakes, if you're making a layer cake, you can brush these syrups onto the cake layers, before you put on a frosting or something, just to add a little bit of additional flavor. If you have a cake that might be particularly dry, this could help to moisten that. You could use it as an ice cream topping. If you do eat meat or fish or poultry, you could use it as a glaze for any of those. You could also turn it into a vinaigrette. So the acid that's in these fruits, as well as the sugar, can definitely be components of a vinaigrette in the first place. So, and the strawberry one that we're going to make today would go especially well with spinach. So spinach being kind of a spring green. In most cases, you might have a fun time making a vinaigrette to go with that. So in addition to those, if you are a person that likes to make ice cream or sorbet, you could turn some of these syrups into, a batch of sorbet. So I'll let you find your own recipe for that, but it's like you're halfway there already. You can use it, as I mentioned, to sweeten drinks, so lemonade or even iced tea if you want it. You could also put it on yogurt. I tend to use even jams and jellies that I make. I tend to mix them into plain yogurt, so that could be fun. So those are just some of the ideas that I had for you. So you know what to do with these if you don't want to just use them for drinks. So as I mentioned in the past, like we were doing the freezer preserves last week, I said even with those, even though they're a little bit thicker, they're thickened with the pectin, you could even use those in some beverages too if you thinned them out a little bit. So having more ways to use these products that you're going to make is always a good thing. All right. So 2 for you today. I have a rhubarb syrup and a strawberry basil syrup. So I'm trying to stick with kind of some seasonal things for now. If you grow rhubarb, or maybe you've seen it at a farmer's market. I know some of the farmer's markets are open and people are staying, distanced. But that is a possibility if you can find it there. Some of the local grocery stores even have rhubarb as well. And then strawberries. So strawberry picking is coming up if you are a local strawberry picker. I got an email yesterday from the place that I usually go north of the city, and they're going to still have it. They're going to figure it out. People are going to be spread apart, so it's coming. In the meantime, I still had my last bag of strawberries from last season, so perfect timing. Going to use those up. And so I thawed those. Those were in the freezer. I thawed them So the way that we're going to make this strawberry syrup today, and maybe I'll just go ahead and start with that one, is that we are going to blend it in the food processor, or you could use a blender, whichever you have and you prefer, mixing it with the basil. So then we're going to strain out the liquid. So if you have strawberries that are thawed, or maybe you buy, uh, frozen strawberries to begin with, if you wanted to skip, well, you still have to strain it to strain the basil out, but if you wanted to skip having to push as much of the solids through a strainer, you could just strain off that strawberry liquid in the first place. Or if you have, if you're not adding the basil and you wanted to just use the juice from frozen strawberries, you could kind of take a shortcut with this syrup. So again, that's if you're using frozen thawed strawberries. All right, so let's jump in. So I think I will do that strawberry basil syrup first. Yeah, I already cooked down the rhubarb in step 1. And I may not even have had to do that because it cooks very quickly. So I just cooked it in water. So I cut it into pieces. Once you cook it down, it'll really soften, and we're really, again, just going to use the liquid part of it. So it doesn't matter if you chop it, excuse me, really finely, or if you chop it into big clumps. If you cook it into really big clumps, it's probably gonna take a little bit longer to cook, but regardless, rhubarb does cook fairly quickly. So I already have that cooked down. All right, so we will start with the strawberry rhubarb. So I'm using my food processor. If you have a blender, go ahead and use that. And I have fresh basil here, so we're going to use about 2 cups of fresh basil. So if that's something that you're growing, you can, and if it ends up being really prolific for you, you could certainly use it for this purpose. So with this, I'm going to take off some of those stems. I've often talked about how if you have tender stems on cilantro or parsley, go ahead and keep them, grind them up. But in this case, you know what? I am going to use these because we're pushing out. Because we're going to strain out the solids, I think I will go ahead and use these so we have that much more basil flavor. So I'm still gonna, kind of break them up. You can see the gears turning here as I'm making these spontaneous decisions. Okay, so we're going to put that basil into the food processor and the strawberries. And because I have limited space here in my food processor, I think what I'm gonna do is just add the strawberries and not necessarily the liquid. I'll add the liquid to the pot, but I'm just going to sift out the strawberries. So let me grab a slotted spoon. All right. So again, in this case, I'm putting my strawberries and my basil into the food processor. If you don't like basil, if you don't have basil, if you have a lot of something else, like I've been talking about lemon balm for weeks. I just have a ton of lemon balm. That would go wonderfully with these strawberries. So you can mix and match different herbs in these syrups and come up with whatever mixes you want. We're not going to put these on a shelf, so it doesn't have to, you've heard me talk about in food preservation recipes, stick to the recipe, don't go off-roading with it. In this case, that would be fine. Okay, so this is the pot that I was going to use to strain the strawberries. So I'm going to put the liquid through this sieve right away, and then I can be done with this bowl. Okay. So we're gonna mash up the basil and the strawberries in the food processor or blender. So as we're cutting up or macerating that basil, all of those wonderful oils are coming out of there. So if you just were using the liquid from some thawed strawberries, you could just take that basil and infuse it by putting that into a pot and kind of making a tea with that juice and those herbs. Just make sure that you tear the basil well enough before you do that. But that's another way, if you didn't have a food processor or a blender to really grind it up, and you were just working with that liquid, that's a way that you could still get that flavor infused into the juice. So we're going to add this, bring this to the forefront now. Add this to the sieve. So this is another one of those ways that you can preserve some strawberries without all of the heat, like canning. We talked about that last week with the freezer jams. If you don't want to heat up, all the canning equipment. It was really hot last week. So this would be a good way to, start working with your strawberries, but not having all of that heat to deal with. So I'm just going to start moving that around. Again, the aim is to get the liquid part out of this. This is going to be like watching paint dry. If there are any questions while I work at this for about a minute, let me know. I'm going to put this down a second and go to the rhubarb and let this just strain. So let me see. Like I said, this is a new, I went ahead and tried this new, I'm afraid to push buttons on this new method because I'm afraid I'm going to do something wrong. So I may have to play with it a little bit. I don't see any other comments. I'm wondering if they'll pop up as they come. Sometimes I have to scroll down, and so another learning curve to get over. Okay, so we're going to let that drip for a little bit, and I'll get back to it. So now we're going to go back to the rhubarb. So like I said, I took that rhubarb, it was chopped up, and I only cooked it in water so far. So from here, we're going to strain this out. Again, we're really just looking for that liquid to make these syrups, and then we're going to add sugar to those and kind of thicken them a bit. So, but they're still a wonderful use for the salads. So let me pull this one to the forefront. So back and forth a little bit with these items. But while that one drips, I'm going to hit the rhubarb. So I have one of these that's already made that I can show you too. There's also something, if you haven't heard of it, called a shrub. So a shrub is a beverage. As far as I know, it's in itself, by itself, is non-alcoholic. But it would be taking some of these syrups and adding vinegar to them. So you can look it up. There it is. How much of the strawberries? How much of the strawberries, what? Anne, I see your question there. Are you talking about a recipe? Okay. So wait a minute. What was I going to say? The shrub. So if you add vinegar to these, and you can look up a recipe for shrub, S-H-R-U-B. It's a fruit syrup vinegar, so like a fruited vinegar, but it's drinking vinegar. I don't know if that sounds good to you. I actually enjoy some of the drinking vinegar beverages that are out there on the market. There's some that are put out by the Bragg's company that makes the liquid aminos, and it's an apple cider vinegar. I believe they sell apple cider vinegar too, but it's like a liquid, it's a drinking vinegar. It's really delicious, and that can be really good for your body's pH balance. Okay, so this is giving me a wonderful pink color. So rhubarb, as you may have seen, the stems can be really beautiful and pink when they're growing. Sometimes you get rhubarb that's more green. So when it cooks, it's kind of this brown color, but as I'm pressing the juice out of this, and I got some on my neck, splattering, it's back to pink. So it's a beautiful color. Just really getting messy here in the kitchen today. So coming up with this beautiful pink syrup, which I'll show you in a moment. Let me pull out the one that's done and show you how that turned out. I already tried some of it over the weekend, so there's not a ton in here. But this was I don't know if you can see the color of that. This says orange rhubarb syrup. So I added some orange zest and some ginger. I actually added some already minced ginger. This is by Ginger People. I use that because I use ginger a lot, and I can certainly work with fresh ginger, but sometimes I just want to take a teaspoon or something out that's already done. So I added ginger and orange to this, and then used that with some sparkling water. So that was kind of fun to try that. So these solids that we have left, the ones from here, because they were just rhubarb and water, are kind of that brownish color. But the ones I had the other day, with the orange and the ginger, they're still mostly brownish, but they have a little bit more color. I'll get some out of here for you. It's hard to see. I don't know this new view. So those have the sugar in them too. And it's nice and tart. So I've been adding this to some plain yogurt and just mixing that in. You could put granola or fresh fruit on top of it. So all of these, byproducts, let's say, are usable. And I believe that I noted that in your recipe. So the rhubarb solids could be used in muffins or a quick bread, even added to a smoothie. So remember, in this case, this was a different recipe I used the other day. In this case, it's just the rhubarb and water. There is no sugar added yet. So if you're putting this into yogurt or smoothie, remember you might also want to add a sweetener because rhubarb is super tart. All right, so I'm going to leave those solids at that point, and I'll bring this juice into a glass container so you can see the color. It's a pretty pink color. Yeah, so it's this beautiful pink syrup that we have. All right. So from there, then I'm going to add that to the pot with the sugar. And the pot that I was going to use is the same one that I had before, so I need to grab that. All right. So making sure there aren't any solids dangling around in there. Pouring that juice back in. And then I'm adding my sugar. So again, rhubarb is pretty tart. There's the sugar going in here. And when I made this, if you're eyeing it up, I did 3/4 of a recipe because I was trying to find rhubarb at the store, didn't, and so I did have to use what I had in my garden. I wasn't thinking I was going to have enough, but I had enough to make about 3/4 of a batch. I'm always careful to not overpick the rhubarb right away. Because I wanted to keep, especially at the end of the season, you don't want to overpick it so that there's not something to come back to next year. Right, so we're going to let that heat up and just let that sugar dissolve. So essentially, that's all the ingredients that are in here. Again, if you wanted to add ginger or orange, you could. So that syrup, that sugar that we're adding is going to thicken that a little bit, make it a little bit more viscous. And so there's not really any other straining to do unless you want to put orange or ginger in there. And then you have, something you want to strain out. Unless you are doing that, there's really no other straining to do. So at that point, we would put it into a jar or a cruet or whatever fun dish or bottle that you want. And you can even use these to make gifts too. So I would, make sure that your recipient knows that it needs to be refrigerated. But these would make wonderful gifts. I suppose I could find a recipe for you to can these too. That is something you could do. Maybe I'll try to find that by the end of the week. So I'm going to let that go and heat up, and we'll make our way back to our basil. All right. So too much more dripped out of there. Tell you what, I'm going to try something. I'm going to put this back in the food processor. So I separated out those liquids, like I said, in the beginning, because they were already in good shape. I just want to see if I put this liquid back in here with the solids, I want to see if by some magic it will strain more quickly This is an experiment. Experimenting on live stream here. Alright, let me just rinse this off. Alright. We'll see if we get any more necessarily drifts through faster. This is all in theory. This is like, I don't quite have like my hypothesis set, but we're gonna see, and of course it's not all gonna fit in there at the same time. And then with this one, with the strawberries, we're also gonna add some lemon, and our sugar, of course, we still have to do that. All right, so this is interesting. Okay, so what I'm getting here in the pot is a little bit thicker. I suppose you could strain these through a jelly bag like we did last week as well. And I think I am definitely going to use the solids from this one. I think I'm going to try it in a smoothie. But also, ooh, I don't even know, maybe a marinade or a vinaigrette. I'm getting so many ideas right now as I look at this beautiful strawberry rhubarb mixture. All right, okay. Kind of see the experiment goes. Any questions? Okay, I see some questions. Let me see what's happening here. Hello. Okay. Shrubs are the best. Elizabeth has had shrubs. Cool. Oh, you said 2 cups of basil. How many cups of strawberries do you mix with the basil? Okay, so this is assuming, I should assume that you did not have the recipe in front of you. So it's 2 pounds of strawberries and 2 cups of the packed basil, right? So the packet of basil that I bought at the store, it said on the container 2 cups. So that was helpful, you know, because when you see it, you know, let's say at the farmer's market, it's kind of like, okay, how many, if you have to, you know, just overbuy, and you can always make a pesto, right? All right, so I'm gonna check this really quick. Really we're just wanting the sugar to dissolve, and we're gonna cool that down. Okay, so that is basically done with the rhubarb, unless you wanted to add any additional. I have actually had ginger syrup in my house in the past. I don't have any right now, but that's something you could add, a little dash of ginger syrup to that, or some dried ginger, or you know, maybe rhubarb ginger does not appeal to you. Maybe you want to add some cinnamon. So if there are any other flavorings that you want to add that you didn't want to put in there while it was cooking, you know, do that sometimes with extracts. I add the extract after. If I'm making granola and I'm making kind of the syrup part of the granola, I will wait to add the vanilla or the other extract afterwards, so it doesn't, I guess, so the flavor is more pronounced and not, you know, heat affected. I mean, if you're usually if you're using vanilla, you're baking it, but I typically add it at the end of the process. All right, so we've got something here. Okay, so a good bit of solids with the basil strawberry. Still a bit coming out. All right, so I'm going to transfer that. Let's go one more round. Any other questions coming in? You're welcome, Ann. Thanks for clarifying. Okay, so I can see, actually I like this better because I can see with this new method that the questions scroll themselves, whereas before you may remember that there were weeks where I was like, does anybody have questions? Oh, no questions, okay. And then I realized that I just had to go like this and they were all there. So now it looks like it's scrolling them up for me. some of you know this going upping my tech game with this whole process was a huge step for me. I'm not a tech person. I don't even have a smartphone. And so then when I finally figured it out, I'm like, okay, I'm settled. Now this past week, they throw me for a loop and they're like, oh, we're changing something. I'm like, no. So again, not the reason that my class disconnected this morning. That was something with the actual internet connection. However, I suppose they've had some time here over the months that we've all been doing things online to think about what is more efficient. So anyway, enough about the technology. Let's get back to our syrup here. So lots of good stuff there that I might put into, I don't know, it's exciting. Maybe I'll even make I have some of the frozen strawberries left. Now that I froze them, now that I thawed them, I'm not gonna freeze them again. So I wanna do something with them. So maybe I will make a strawberry crisp using maybe the recipe like we used last week with the pears. We did the pear and rosemary crisp for the herbs and fruits fruit day. All right, so I have this pot. That's a good amount of the basil strawberry mixture here. So I'm going to put that onto our stove. Let me move this rhubarb one over. I'll strain that in a moment. So kind of back and forth here with these two. So turning this one on, and I've got a cup of sugar. So it's quite a bit of sugar, but these are very concentrated in flavor. So sort of like I have talked about making jams and jellies. There's so much sugar in them because you need that to make the pectin work. But at least when I use jams and jellies, you don't need a lot. So, all right. Mixing that sugar in. That dissolved, and in the meantime, I'm also going to cut a lemon. So a fresh lemon, if you wanted to use lemon juice, do that as well. Okay, so all the ingredients are in there. So we have lemon, sugar, basil, and strawberries. So 4 ingredients. And the rhubarb was essentially rhubarb water and sugar. And then, like I said, if there were any other flavorings that you wanted to add, that is totally up to you. Okay. Let's give this a mix. I'm going to turn it up a little bit. So this one's definitely more opaque. For whatever that's worth with, your beveraging, your cocktailing ideas. Let's strain the rhubarb. So I have this handy funnel that has a insert that does this sort of thing. It's a sieve and a funnel. I got this years ago for a gift, and I remember when I received it. It was not something I knew about or asked about, and it was one of those gifts that my parents bought me that I was like, what? I didn't know I needed this or something, and then I was like, oh, it's actually really handy. So let's see if that fits into this jar. I might get a bigger jar because I'm afraid this isn't going to be quite large enough. So we'll strain it into something a little bit larger. It's not a ball jar or a mason jar. All right. A little bit of housekeeping here. This one then, there wasn't too much, like I said, not too many solids left, just a tiny, tiny bit. There we have our syrup. So I want to taste it just to, I'm sure that it's plenty sweet. Just give it a taste. It's still hot. Very good. Yeah. So this, as it cools down, make it a little bit thicker, but really nice. So again, this was the one that had orange in it. So it's a little bit more, it's a little darker. And it's just, random dry that I keep it in. And then this one, rhubarb water and sugar. So another fun way to use your rhubarb. If you've got so much and you get tired of making pies and you get tired of making jams, there's a way you can make your rhubarb beverages. So that will be nice. All right, so back to our basil strawberry. So really, I'm just trying to, again, dissolve the sugar with this. There's nothing that I'm trying to cook or even thicken. It's really just dissolving the sugar. So that comes together pretty quickly. Let me grab. Take a taste. So that one's not quite as sweet, but I'm perfectly fine with that. All right. So we're gonna strain this one as well. Let me just rinse out that funnel. See, like I said, this one's a little bit more opaque, and I can tell that it's going to need a little coaxing. There are probably more strawberry solids in this one. That strainer that I used for the strawberries was not quite as fine as the one with the rhubarb. The rhubarb was like a double netted, let's say a double netted sieve. Now, even though it took out more of the solids, it's going to be harder to clean. So that's why I like this one here, because it's something that could go through the dishwasher. However, I couldn't easily or quickly do that whole batch through here. It's got the smaller space. All right. Let's move to our other jar. So if you wanted this to be sweeter, you could certainly add more sugar. And you could also add other sweeteners. If you don't want white sugar, you could do honey, you could do maple syrup, you could do agave, whatever else you might enjoy. Any questions? I mean, these are fairly straightforward in terms of ingredients. I do also have listed on the handout, I have a base recipe for herb-infused simple syrup. So simple syrup is the general phrase or the general name for a water and sugar, basically a water and sugar mixture. So if you ever, have gone to a bar or a place that serves cocktails, simple syrup is, and you might even have used it at home. It's something you can buy, but it's also something you can easily make. It's basically a water, sugar mixture, and the ratio is not coming to my head right now. But that's all that it is. And again, just cook so that the sugar is dissolved. Some people will cook there's a little bit more to make it thicker. But that simple syrup, that's what a simple syrup is. It's basically just water and sugar or sweetener of some sort. So those herb-infused simple syrups, kind of like we did last week with the lemon balm jelly, where we started out and we cooked those in the water and then strained it and then used that strained, almost essentially like tea, added the pectin, added the sugar, I think we added a little bit of lemon juice, and then turned that into a jelly. So kind of the same thing. Water, sugar, and herbs in a saucepan, cooking it till the sugar dissolves, and letting that cook for a little bit so those flavors can sort of meld. But then basically just straining it out. So you can make all kinds of simple syrups for beverages this summer if you want to. So if you're growing a lot of herbs or you find them at the market, I mean, you've seen this whole like craft cocktail. Perhaps you've seen this whole craft cocktail, artisan cocktail phenomenon happening in recent years. There's probably been a few now, but you have these amazing cocktails. Of course, they're happy to charge you $15 a pop for a lowball drink, but they're interesting, and I've even seen ones with elderberry blossom. In fact, I have a tree. I have I have 4 elderberry trees in my yard now, and I have used the berries to make elderberry syrup, which can be quite expensive, and that's something that I use in the winter, or most of the year, maybe 6 or 9 months out of the year, for immune boosting. So in the summer, the blossoms start, and they're very fragrant. And so I've used the blossoms to make jelly. But if you take the blossoms, then you're not going to get the berries. I mean, essentially, that's where the berries come from if you know anything about, botany or plants or anything. And so, since I have so many trees now, and they only want to be more and more prolific, maybe I could sacrifice. I don't know that the blossoms give you the same immunity that the berries do, especially if you're simply using them in cocktail syrups. It's probably not. I don't know. I guess there's some would say there are health benefits. Anyway, I might try that this year. So lots of ways to use different herbs or flowers, like I said. I suppose if you had some edible roses, like what is it called? The kind of roses that we get rose hips from that are edible. I can't think of the name of it right now. But I suppose you could make, a syrup from rose petals, or even from rose hips. You can make a rose hip syrup for beverages. I think I did that one year. Or did I use it to make a jelly? I know that I used rose hips. I have a picture of that somewhere. That was back in my urban homesteading days. So, all right. So we have our 2 jars here, and there might have been a little bit more that I could have squeezed out of that pulp if I had spent more time, but I'm excited to use that to make a crisp. So we have our 2 jars here. So I got 2 pints out of that recipe. And what is the yield? Or sorry, 2 half pints, so that's a pint, and that's exactly what the yield was. So approximately, it was pretty much right on. All right. So we have our rhubarb syrup, very hot still, and we have our basil and strawberry syrup. I would label and date those. These are going to go in the fridge. You could freeze them. If you're going to freeze them, make sure you leave enough headspace. Again, if that expands and it doesn't have room to go anywhere, it's going to probably crack the jar or blow the top of the jar. So just be careful. But these, with the amount of sugar that's in these, especially this one, this has more sugar and fewer, other things, solids in it, it's probably going to last a good long time in the fridge. Make sure you date though, just kind of, so you kind of know, how long, when people ask me the question, how long does this last? Put the date on there to start with, so then you know what your beginning point is. And I need these lids. So once these would cool down, then I would put the lids on there and label and date. So again, remember, save those solids to mix in with yogurt, or to put, I don't know, you can even try to, if you are into, making interesting pizzas, you could even put them, a little dollop of it on a pizza or something. There are sweet and savory pizza ideas. You could spread it onto toast with cream cheese. I did that last week with the rhubarb. I had cream cheese on some gluten-free toast, and then I put the rhubarb on there. So that's another idea. All different ways that you can use, like I say, these byproducts as well. So any other questions? Let's see here. I have a great job. I do. Oh, I've done a great job. Thank you. But I do have a great job. I was just having a conversation with a friend last night about how much I love my work and how integrated it is into my life, which can be a blessing and a curse. It's like I could always be working because it's part of my life, but then again, my work just feels like it naturally, goes in. There isn't like the clocking out and that sort of thing. So yes, I do have a great job, but thank you for saying I'm doing a great job. All right, so Deborah, jelly from peonies, interesting. Wow, I've been seeing all the beautiful pictures of the peonies in the last week. I don't have any in my yard, but I've been enjoying all of the pictures, and I didn't know that was edible. Okay, so on this note, in talking about using flowers, You can use dandelions, of course, if you've heard about dandelion. There's a rumor that my great grandmother, who I'm named after, that she used to make dandelion wine. She never drank a drop of alcohol in her life, but she was hardcore about making her dandelion wine. They said. And so there's that. So that in that way, I mean, you can eat those. You can make dandelion jelly. Violets. We talked about violet jam. So I suppose you could try that. I think the violets are kind of maybe past by now. I wonder if you could use clover flowers. There are lots of other edible flowers. If you wanted to try a savory, you could try chives. We also have, looking at my garden, I have borage. I will have, I don't have any nasturtiums planted this year, but I suppose any of those flowers that we know that are edible, I suppose you could turn any of those into a syrup. That would be really interesting. And then make sure you're charging somebody $25 to make a cocktail. No, very cool. So peonies, I had no idea. Cool. Any other questions about these syrups? So again, we have our strawberry basil, which could be strawberry and any kind of herb. I'm gonna maybe try some lemon balm next because we've got so much of it. Or make a plain lemon balm syrup. And then we've got our rhubarb. I think I'm gonna mix one of these in with some sparkling water. I'm heading to a rehearsal after this, and so I'm gonna grab a refreshing beverage to take with me. And so maybe I'll do that. But again, the recipes are linked with the Milwaukee Rec Department page. So those should be available to you in a PDF. Otherwise, I will post those by the end of the week on my business page, and I'll try to take some photos. That's the one advantage of having the recipes from my page, is that I usually have some photos with them. So you can get both. You can get the recipes ahead of time from Milwaukee Rec, so you've got them during the demo. Then you can also see the recipes or the photos later in the week. So tomorrow we have, we're doing a vegan breakfast class. I have a couple of dishes that I'm going to show you for that. And in fact, I have two dishes, I have 3 recipes that I was hoping to show you. We'll see, when I do my prep tomorrow, we'll see how many of those we'll actually do. I might be able to do all 3. We'll see. This 45 minutes can fly. All right, so thank you all for coming today. If you do think of any other ways to use these wonderful syrups, let me know. And thank you for your patience with my technology upgrades, etc. I feel like there's this light cutting across the screen. I don't know if you can see that. I'm seeing it. But anyway, okay, so thank you all for coming, and I will see you soon.